Good afternoon, everyone. I am Serafina D'Souza, the Program Coordinator for Moneylife Foundation. I would like to start by welcoming each one of you to this session on retirement savings by Mr. Debashis Basu. Mr. Debashis Basu is a chartered accountant by qualification with 29 years of experience as a journalist. He has worked with most of India's leading newspapers, such as the Times of India, Business World, Business Today, Business India, Financial Express, and has written columns for Business Standard and the Economic Times. And I now invite Mr. Basu to please begin the session.
Good afternoon, everybody. This happens to be one of the most complicated things, even for us, retirement. And the reason for that is that when people talk about investing, they talk about a future which is fairly visible. So you're able to see 15 years, 20 years, or 25 years of investing ahead. You're able to draw upon the past. For instance, people may be very easily telling you, look at the way the stock market has gone up, or look at the way people have invested in this product or some of the other products that are freely available. Or at least they can say that if you invest in, let's say, bank FD, for instance, is a very, very popular product among Indian savers, you will never lose money. Banks don't fail in India. So these are all of the things that you can look back on the past, draw upon, and project into the future, and you may be fairly all right. The problem about anything to do with retirement is that there are just too many things we don't know, and we have to assume about the future. The past is no guide at all, for the simple reason that every single person will have to deal with these things individually, and their condition would be completely different from the other person. For instance, just to give you an example, all our calculations have to be based on a simple assumption: how long am I going to live? And none of us know how long we are going to live. That's one of the 6 unknowns that I'm talking about. So even for us who do a lot of work on the returns and risks of different asset classes, we find that retirement is one of the worst things in terms of calculating that we can think of. One sec. Sorry. I'll take you through the 6 unknowns. There are 2 sessions that I do on retirement. This is the first one. And the first one, as the mailer would have informed you, is all about how much is enough and whether the money would last or not. So this is all about calculations, possibilities based on our understanding of what these 6 unknowns are and what you need to know about them. I start with an example of a person called, let's say, Mr. Kumar. All right. He's an average middle class person. He's about 45, which essentially means that he's got 15 years to go for retirement. He'll have some amount of savings and investing, and let's look at what it is. Let's say he's saved up about 20 lakhs, okay, which will grow. That is one of the assumptions we have to make, that how much would 20 lakhs grow over 15 years. It all depends on where he is invested. He's possibly paying the last stages of his EMI for a house that he would have bought. Right? This is a very typical Indian situation. Maybe he earns a salary of about 60,000 rupees per month, and his household expenses are about, let's say, 20,000 rupees. And he's worried about children's education because costs are rising, and depending on where it is, whether in India or abroad, costs could be very, very different. You ask him about retirement savings, usually have no idea at all. This is a standard problem of most of the middle class people. Now, apparently, all of us have a dream we're going to do certain things post-retirement, because post-retirement period is a long period, maybe 15, 20 years. We are living quite long. And a lot of things that we wanted to do, possibly we would not be able to, we've not done, which we want to do in future, for instance. Question is that whether he would have the money to do all of the things, the obligations, the standard obligations of saving enough for the various expenditures that he would have, and then all of these things that he wants to do. At 60, he retires, which means from the time that we've seen him over the last 15 years, he's saved. Okay? It all depends on in what he has saved. LIC is a very, very powerful institution in India. It sells what is called, let's say, money back plan. Not necessarily that you would have money in money back plan, but it's quite possible that given they have millions of agents around the country, Mr. Kumar would have bought a money back plan. Sounds very good. You put your money for 25 years or 20 years or whatever, and you keep getting money back. He would have certainly put a lot of money in bank FDs, although we have discovered today that there are people who don't have money in bank FDs. That's a surprise to me, because almost 30-40% of household savings now, according to the Reserve Bank of India, is going into bank FDs. It's a very popular thing because money is very safe. We are all for it. At Moneylife, we said you should put your money in the bank. But at age 60, what is his single biggest asset? Any guess? Absolutely. His property, his house. Now, that is an asset, but it's a very peculiar kind of asset. He's living in it. So it's not liquid. He can't sell it. The notional value of that asset may be 2 crore. Just to give an example, 15 years later, an average household. What is he going to do with that 2 crore? He can't do anything. He can't even take 1 rupee out of the 2 crore, even if he wants to. Forget about 50 lakhs. Right? Now, at 60, he retires and he's got another 25 years to live. Assume, that's one of the main things that, as I said, in retirement planning, is that you have to assume many of these things which are not known. Suppose he lives for another 25 years. It's not uncommon. A lot of people are living beyond 80 these days, thanks to better quality of food and healthcare. At that stage, let us look step by step what are his income, expenditure, saving, wealth, etc. Now, if you recall, I had said that he has about 20,000 rupees per month of expenditure. In 15 years, thanks to pure inflation, that figure has gone up to now 60,000 rupees per month. All right? Over 15 years, 20,000 has become 60,000. 3 times in 15 years is a very normal inflation in a country like India. That's another thing you will have to assume. What is the inflation that we are suffering? Inflation is not what the RBI says. Inflation is not what the finance minister tells you in press conferences. Inflation is what we actually feel, we who live in the urban areas, who are paying for all kinds of services which are not counted by the government. That is inflation. Cost of fuel, cost of food, all of that is real inflation for us, and the money that we actually pay, not some economist's calculation. So on a 9% basis, 20,000 cost per month will become 60,000 rupees cost per month. That is at 60, the day he retires. Now, which will grow now over the next 25 years, when typically a person would not have any earnings except the savings that he would have. Assuming he's not a professional, he's not a doctor, or he's not a lawyer who can keep earning till 85, this session is not for them. Because the whole point about retirement planning is assumption that at 60 you retire and you do not have regular sources of earning except out of the money that you have saved, and you have expenses. So this slide is all about his expenses. 60 at 9%, 60,000 per month will become 4,80,000 per month after 25 years. Now, I've made all kinds of assumptions. You can challenge those assumptions and you can adapt them to your requirement. For instance, you can say 20,000 per month would have been an expenditure, but I don't need to spend 20,000. It's not the same kind of expenditure that I would have when I retire. So maybe it will be 40,000 for you or 45,000 for you. Now, no matter where you start, that 9% curve is guaranteed. You can start lower. You can say I'll save, or I don't need to spend so much of money, but if you start at 40, it won't be 4,80,000, maybe it will be around 2,70,000. I'm just giving an example. That curve which points to increasing expenditure in a situation where income is not there, apart from the savings, is guaranteed. That is inescapable because that's not in your hands. Now, I had assumed 80% of post-retirement expenses. So that comes to around 60,000. You can jolly well adjust a little bit, but 60 is not likely to be 20, right? Or not likely to be 30 or so on. What are his assets at that stage? Okay. Our assumption was that he was saving 15,000 rupees a month. And he also had 20 lakh savings, which has grown. Okay. There are two components to his rising assets from 45 to 60. One component is a regular savings that he has made, which I have assumed at 7%. 7% is post-tax. If you earn 60,000 rupees a month, which is what I had assumed for Mr. Kumar's case, he is in the tax bracket. So all his income that he makes out of his bank FD or money back or whatever you call it would be taxable. Most of that income would be taxable. It won't be tax-free. The only source of tax-free income is long-term income out of long-term capital gain out of shares and equity mutual funds where Mr. Kumar is not invested, because Indians are not investing in equity mutual funds. Indians are by and large not investing in shares today. So it's very realistic to assume that he will not have any investment in any of these two products. At 50,000 rupees, and no matter what product he invests in, his post-tax return is going to be around 7% or so. Just take an example, if it's a 9% fixed income product, maybe some bond he's bought or some FD he's bought, which is giving him 9%. So 70% of that, if 30% is tax, 70% of that is 6.3% of 9%. I have assumed 7, which is a very fairly generous assumption. So once again, to recap, 50,000 rupees per month invested at a post-tax rate of 7% is going to grow to 50 lakhs over 15 years at the time he retires. So that is a saving that has grown to 50 lakhs. Remember, he also had 20 lakhs of savings at that stage, which itself would grow. All right. That also at 7% compounded over 15 years would grow to around 50 lakh rupees. So at the end of his retirement, when he's 60, he's got a combination of these two, apart from his house, of course. He's got 50 lakhs which is grown from his assets and 50 lakhs which is grown from his regular savings. Now let's combine the two. The first set of calculations showed how his costs would rise. The second set of calculations showed how his investments would rise. All right. If he puts this entire 1 crore in a bank FD, he would be getting, let's say, 9% interest. Just giving an example. Senior citizen, 9% interest. Now 9% of 1 crore is 9 lakhs a year. He is once again in the taxable bracket. If you earn 9 lakhs a year, you have to pay tax. Okay. So assume the income is about 77,000 rupees per month out of his interest income. Interest income coming from 9% of the 1 crore that he has invested. His starting cost is 60,000 per month. So every month he is getting a bank interest of 77,000. Every month his expenses is of 60,000 rupees. All right. After a while, his expenses after around 14th or 15th year, his expenses would start rising and would be more than the money that he is making out of his bank income, bank FD. So, and very quickly he'll start drawing down upon the 1 crore which is there in the bank. So his cost will be more than his income, and he'll start drawing upon the principal. By the time it's about 17 years or so, roughly, he has run out of money. In this scenario, you can change the figures a little bit here and there. 17 would be 19 maybe, but if you invest in these products, and if this is the kind of savings that you would have made, and this is the kind of investment you would have made, and this is the kind of expenses you would have had, under these assumptions, this is pure arithmetic. In this case, with the benefit of hindsight, in Mr. Kumar's case, what exactly went wrong? Okay. One of the things that went wrong, and about which none of us can do anything about, is that we put a huge amount of money in property. So over there I put 1 crore as his savings there. I mean, he has still a choice. He can sell the property and go to a place which is smaller, somewhere else. He'll have lots of money because property values are going up. But we necessarily have to go through this process, and I think this generation, another 15-20 years later or 25 years later, will have to take the call. They'll have a lot of money stuck in the property, and they may have much less money in cash or liquid assets. So they will be asset rich and cash poor, so to speak, and they have to take a decision of what to do with that property. We have no choice but to go through this. We all want an apartment or a flat for ourselves, and we have to pay the market price that builders demand, and that the whole segment is unregulated, and so we are suffering. Apart from that, there are 6 unknowns which faced Mr. Kumar at 40, 45 or whatever, which he should have calculated. First, he should have calculated the risk of under-investing. You invest less or save less. You invest in the wrong products. So 20 lakhs could have become maybe 1 crore if you are invested in a different set of products. But if you choose to put in money back or FD or whatever, it will only grow up to 50 lakhs. If you saved instead of 15,000, if you had saved 18,000, it will make a dramatic difference combined with a different product that you choose to your terminal wealth. So 15,000 could have become 18, and the product chosen could have become equity mutual fund or a balanced fund or a combination of these instead of bank FD, and your wealth would have been much more. Typically, most Indians are saving less and are investing maybe in the wrong kind of products because they're not thinking about it. It's not that they're doing it by choice, maybe they're doing it because they're not thinking about it. Biggest issue and completely unknown is the longevity risk. Now this is quite something that all of us must think at some stage or the other, because from 80 to 85 it's not another 5 years. It's 5 years of high expenses. At 70, the money that we need for ourselves is different from the money that we need at 80. You don't have to consume anything. Just the probability that you may fall ill and you may require higher cost intervention is much more than when you're at 80 than you're at 70. Of course, anything can happen anytime, but we are only talking of a probability of what happens. Very interestingly, all this I'm giving numbers and talking in a very, very arithmetic manner, let's say. The fact is that if you have to make a choice at 80 or 85 about a particular procedure, a doctor says this is the latest procedure, chances of success is very good, but it's very expensive. Are you likely to say, no, I will not do it? Are your children likely to say, no, don't bother? No, we won't say that. We will try till the last to get the best possible treatment. More difficult cases, later stage, best possible treatment means very expensive treatment in this country, because healthcare is another thing which is completely unregulated. Hospitals are under no regulation, especially in the areas that we live, where quality of service is completely dependent, and even if you pay very highly, you don't get that service, but quality of service is highly dependent on the money that you pay. So that these are the hidden risks of longevity. It's not another 5 years. It's not whatever you're spending your money per month into 5. It's much more if we are in for a bad luck. Now, this is another point. The second point is another very, very major point. While I'm talking about I'm talking about a situation where you are supposed to save and look after yourself. Well, that's not the story for many, many Indians. We may have kids who are very nice, who look after us, and so on and so forth. If there is a continuity, if you have children with whom you have a great equation, and if you anybody's phone ringing, then you have to probably put it off. What do we do? It's never happened before. I don't have a phone with me.
Someone's phone, please switch off your mobile phones.
So if there is continuity, then again it's a completely different story. When all of my assumption is that you'll have to save, you'll have to look after yourself. If you were to give part of your or almost your entire assets to somebody like your children, and they look after you, then none of these things apply. Then there is a question of household income, and the income is bequeathed, and that money that you have, that money that you created, no matter how little or how much it is, has got a life of another 40 years because your children is going to live for that long. So this is another unknown or another issue that is different for each person and has to be factored in. Third, we don't calculate. This is somewhat known, but we don't calculate, and probably we need to calculate and see how the composition of expenses change from the time we are 60 or 65 or 60 or 70, and how it changes onto later. The earlier stage: food, household expenses, healthcare, travel and leisure. These are your main expenses, all right, in case you don't have a liability. Otherwise, later it's food, elder care, household and healthcare. Now, this elder care cost is frightful today. I know it because I spend money for my parents. Both my parents are pretty old, and we need to spend money on that. The costs have got no connection with the service that you get. Costs have no connection with whatever inflation rate you might assume. And this is the money that you will spend. You just cannot leave them like that. Okay? And to be doubly sure, you will spend more. You'd rather spend 20% more and be sure about it, because you're not there to take care of them at home, or not there most of the time. So this cost element, please calculate. It's very, very significant. And especially because even if you have children, we are no longer, I keep telling people that we used to, when we were kids, my mother and my entire mother's side family had come from what used to be called East Pakistan. They were not from West Bengal, they were from East Bengal or East Pakistan. And they had come like refugees. And there were 4 or 5 families, they were all had bought land and, close to each other, because you need to be together. It's an alien land. It may speak the same language, but it's a different place. You uprooted. So people used to share, and they all had cousins. And when my vacation, when I used to go to my uncle's place, we were all grown up with so many of our cousins, and not even exactly first cousins. There are 2-3 families removed, but they were all together, and they all used to help each other. Now that's gone. We are nuclear families. And in fact, many cases, even if you have loving children, they're not staying with you. They're probably staying in the US and sending money and calling you every day and making sure that you're fine. So, for these situations especially, elder care costs are humongous. And costs are of various kinds. I won't go into the details of it, but you have to do some amount of calculation to figure out what kind of costs these are. Then comes the question of the how much other kinds of expenditure you would need to spend. What is the kind of other expenditure you have? Now, there is a rule of thumb among financial planners, let's say. Globally, people have tried to simplify all these calculations, because if you keep all the calculations open and constantly changing, you'll never arrive at a figure. You will go mad trying to figure out how much money you need. So people have simplified this by saying that 80% of your last expenditure, maybe at the time of retirement, if you're spending 50,000 rupees a month, just assume 80% or 40,000 rupees a month is what you will need to spend. This is based on the current expenditure pattern that you're actually spending. A lot of people say, after my retirement, I'll do this or that. So that is a question of desire. It's not a question of what you actually have been spending and you will continue to spend. That's guaranteed that you'll definitely spend that kind of money. There's a professor called Dan Ariely. In the US, he's done a lot of work in this particular area. He said, why assume 80%? Why not more or less? So he interviewed about 500 people post-retirement, right? And instead of asking how much money you spend, he asked them, what would you like to do? Which is the desire area. What typically in a day or in a month or in a year, what are the various things that you would like to do, that you would love to do? So he calculated the expenses on the basis of that. Nothing very, very significant, but if they're traveling once a year, maybe he said, I would like to, at least visit want to see my grandchildren maybe thrice a year. I'm able to go and I would like to go. So I need money for that. Based on that calculation, the figure came to 135%. Not less, but more. Again, this is something that we have to decide what we want to do. But if there is something that we want to do which we haven't done, and that's a desire that we want to provide for, then you have to calculate the cost of that. And typically you might end up saying that I need more rather than less. All that was about money that Mr. Kumar had and how much money he would want to spend and so on. Let us assume an alternative scenario by which his assets are not 1 crore, but he's followed a little more prudent way of investing and his assets are actually 1.66 crore, right? And once again, he starts with 60,000 rupees per month, and instead of this smooth 4.8 lakh to expenditure that we have assumed, which is very well covered by a little bit of money that he has saved up, so which basically means that if he starts with 1.66, which is another 66% more than what he had, he would be very fine, he would be comfortable. The problem in this particular assumption is that nothing in life is so smooth as to see those curves. The problem in life is that it could well be the blue line, which is there is a sudden jerky movement in expenditure at various times of your life, and then leading to a very last sudden jump over there when you're fairly well advanced in age. Each of these jerks will reduce the money that you have in the bank. This is outside your normal expenditure. This is not your normal 60,000 per month expenditure. This also has to be accounted for, and this is another unknown. We don't know about it. Right? I'm just making you aware of the possibilities. Not all of these things will happen to everybody. It will happen to somebody. Only thing, we don't know who's going to face what. That's all. For somebody like Mr. Kumar, this is the kind of asset mix he will end up with. The bulk, 65% of his assets would be in property. We did an interesting evaluation. Every week, the newspaper called ET Wealth features a family. All right? And what I'm saying is not theoretical at all. I'll give you an example. And we do these kind of studies our research all the time. We tabulated every week ET Wealth profiles a family, and this family is asked how much money you have in various assets. So they'll say, I have 2.5 lakhs in equity mutual fund, I have 3 lakhs in the bank, and the value of my property is 27 lakhs. Okay? What we did, these are real life stories, real life cases with picture of the guy standing with his wife and kid, and his assets are profiled. We compiled about 10 or 12 of these families. How many? 10 of these families, 10 weeks in a row. And in each case, we have actually put down what the family has said in an Excel sheet, and we worked out what is the value of the property. On an average, the asset for these 10 families is about 80 to 85% in the property. I have only assumed 65%, right? So, and they are young. These are, in their 30s. Most of them are in the 30, 32, 35, that kind of an age group. Now, many of them, after having paid this set of EMI and being very comfortable with this, they'll probably try to move to a different house. So I've paid off the previous loan, I need a bigger place and a better place in a better locality, so they'll take another loan. And the EMI will continue, which is why I've assumed that Mr. Kumar still has an EMI to pay at 45. This is a reality. It's not I'm making up any of these stories. So they will end up with 65, 70, 75% of their money invested in property which is illiquid, which is of very high value but completely illiquid and does not do anything to meet with the rising expenses, either regular or irregular expenses. This kind of asset mix will give no income, virtually nothing to meet your rising expenses, because that's a flat that where you stay, you can't really rent it out. So this is another unknown for most people of doing investments without thinking, doing investments without calculating the long-term value of each of the assets where they're putting in the money at the end of 15-20 years. Where do I stand? This is where they'll stand, because they have not done the calculation of how much will grow, at what rate, and what will be the value of that in real terms against inflation. Fifth unknown, what would be the income out of those assets that we have invested over there? Now, while it's fine to say that you will live till 85 and you need to calculate all your expenses, and it's also very fine to say that over the long term stocks or mutual funds give great return, especially on a post-tax basis. Imagine a 9% FD post-tax is 6.3%. 30% is tax. So 2.1% is tax and you're getting about 6.3%. Now, it is very easy for equity mutual funds to give you 6.3% over 15 years. It's not difficult at all. They don't have to do anything. It's the companies which give. But we don't invest in that. But most importantly, we cannot invest in these products beyond a certain age. So while you may not have done this throughout your lifetime and you may have saved in safe products, post-retirement, even if you think that you're going to live for another 20-25 years, you cannot take advantage of that kind of investments, not at least in the way you would have done it earlier. So while you have time on your side, the time on your side after 60 is different from the time on your side when you're 45. The 25 years or 15 years post-retirement is different from the 25 years or 15 years pre-retirement. It's simply a matter of prudence of how much risk you can take at what point in time. However, at the same time, to go to the other extreme, and I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I've retired, I don't want to take any risk, I want to put my entire money in FD. You can do that. If that is the guiding principle, that you don't want to lose any money, even even on a 10-year, 15-year basis, you don't want to take a chance, you can certainly do that. I'm not advising anything either way, but please do all of the calculations that it means. The calculation of of your income from your fixed income assets, which is bank FD, not being enough in the absence of any other sources of income, or in the absence of any other support in case you need, of not being enough to meet your rising household expenses. If you're comfortable, if you think that that's fine, I can manage within, most certainly it's an individual choice. But it's worth thinking. Once again, I'm not prescribing anything either way. I'm just making you aware that 20 years is a very, very long time. Some amount of money can possibly go into assets which give you a very high post-tax return in case you're in the tax bracket. Finally, the big unknown, which is inestimable in financial terms, the kind of support that we are able to provide to our parents, for instance, it's financially significant if they were to do it all by themselves. As I said, Indian children do support their parents, especially for big expenses like hospitalization. But if that is not your case, if you don't have children, or if there is some other issue over there, and if you want to do all the calculations and all the support for yourself, and yet you want a trouble-free retirement, there is no getting away from the fact that you have to take a little more risk and look at products which give you higher returns, especially higher post-tax returns. HSBC did a survey of middle-aged people in India, and they put it out in the form of a survey report of retirement planning. The respondents, about 1,000 or so people across the country, different cities, 50% said cost of funding a home affect their ability to save. It's a huge issue. 49% are motivated to save towards retirement due to fear of not having money to live on in later life. It's a real fear. Children's education and rising expenses are other obstacles. Costs are rising. Costs are moving targets. Human mind is not geared to figure out a moving target. We like something that is very clear and static. We hate stuff that is constantly moving, especially that's going up if it's expenses. This is from HSBC Future of Retirement of India report. Pretty recent, just about February 2013. Some of the things, this room has a lot of people who have long way to go for retirement, and people who, despite having retired, have many years to live. Some things you can control, how much you save and invest. If there is one thing that any financial literacy program or any such thing to do with money has to emphasize and people have to understand, is that without depriving yourself unduly, because that's again, it's not good for us, please save as much as possible. First of all, no matter where you invest, investment I'm just leaving out. But if you do not waste money, if you do not lose money, and if you were to simply save, that's like half the job done. A lot of young people these days are not saving enough. You certainly can calculate where you invest, which is the second part, so that you can ensure a future income out of those assets, right? That's within your control. Retirement spending is entirely within your control. Of course, there's a bare minimum, but by and large, it is within your control. Tax, Indian tax system for individuals is very clear, very minimal, very transparent. I hate Indian taxation system overall and how things are enforced and so on. There's a lot of problems in that, but for us savers, we get a huge tax break in when we borrow for house, both interest and principal repayment, 2.5 lakhs, 1 lakh for one and 1.5 lakhs for another. Long-term capital gains of anything that is traded, that's mutual fund and equities, are tax-free, which is, despite all the problems of Indian taxation system, this is something that no country, virtually no country in the world gives. The housing tax break that the government has been giving for the last 10 years, and the fact that long-term capital gains for equity and mutual fund is tax-free is an incredible benefit that we can make use of. And unfortunately, people are making use of the first, but not of the second. Anything else that you do, there is a tax impact. The figures are not, the base figures slabs are not rising enough. After many years, the government now says up to 2 lakhs, 1,80,000 and up to 2 lakhs is tax free. It will take another 10 years maybe for this figure to go up, by which time inflation will take your income and your expenses to a much higher level. So you will pay tax. And the government will slowly, many years later, one of these days say, yeah, now we need to raise the slab from 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs, by which time you are in the tax bracket. So tax impact of any kind of income has to be calculated. There's no getting away from that. And it takes a large chunk of income for doing nothing. I mean, if you were to give away 30% of your income to the government because you hadn't thought about it or you haven't planned, that doesn't make sense. It's fully within your control. Especially since many other things that you can't control. Inflation rate, you cannot control. It's not in your hands. Problem is, most people don't even calculate what is the actual rate of inflation. And the actual rate of inflation in India is double digits. It's not 6%, it's not 4%, it's not 9%. The actual rate of inflation of healthcare, which is what a retired person would need, or probably would need, let's say, but he is more liable, he is more susceptible, is 15 to 20% compounded. Just find out 5 years earlier what was the cost of a bypass surgery and what it is now. Do your own calculation. It's not less than 15 to 20% compounded per annum. Interest rate, not in our hands. In America, the middle class is destroyed by the government policy of keeping interest rate low. The government has a compulsion of keeping the interest rate low because they think that the business will borrow at a low rate, it will create jobs, it will create revenues, the economy will do well, everybody will prosper. Whether that will happen or not, we don't know. But meanwhile, the middle class, the retirees are crying because with 1%, 2%, 3% yield, you are, if this is what you had planned for and if you are invested in, then it's going to be a big issue. I don't think that's going to be the situation here, but we are already in that situation. I'll tell you why. In America, inflation is 2% and let's say yield of fixed income products is 2%. Here, inflation is 9%, yield from fixed income products is also 9%. We're exactly the same. You may be getting more in figurative terms, in nominal terms, but it is not an inflation beating income. And the government on all countries will have a vested interest in keeping interest rate low, which is going to penalize savers and elders. This is a reality of life, right? So either you have that much more in the bank, so it doesn't matter, so your interest income is significant, it doesn't matter, or you invest in something else which gives you capital gains, which is not taxed. To sum up, investment till retirement is somewhat known, so you can plan. Longevity completely unknown. Post-retirement expenses unknown but can be controllable. I must make a distinction here between what I said is what can be controlled and what is unknown. Okay? When I say unknown, is because we do not calculate. Therefore, it's unknown to us, plus we've not thought through like Professor Dan Ariely has done, which is that what we would like to do rather than what our expenditure is. But we can control it. It's unknown, but we can control. That's the distinction. Your assets at retirement, yeah, you can calculate depending on, if you do the calculations, these rates that I talked about, these are called, let's say, base rates, which essentially means a rate at which an asset class is going to grow over a long period of time. I have another session which is called How to Be Smart with Your Money. There I share our research on how much to expect from each asset class, just to give an example. So if you were to invest in good quality equity mutual funds, you would probably get about 11%, 12% compounded over a long period of time. Okay, and remember that is tax free, because anything more than 1 year is tax free. And this is long period. In 1 year it may be -5, in the next year it may be +17, in the following year it may be 0, and so on. But over a period of time, this is what you should expect. If you were to invest in any of the traditional insurance products, you should expect not more than 6%, not more than 7%. I think in future it will be even lower. Okay? If you were to invest in bank FD, your bank FD, 1 year FD in the last 15 years has gone up to a maximum of 12%. It was in 96, 97, I think, and has gone down to a level of 5%. So you can, these are the figures that you can calculate. So if you're in 8-9% situation, you can calculate how much money if you are saving at a certain rate, how much money you would have. Any calculation of more than 10 years is possible, even for assets that are volatile, even for assets like property or equity funds or shares, good quality blue chip shares. We can still calculate, although the amount of volatility is much more. The longer the duration, the closer you are to a certain assumed figure. You will be right, but I'm not talking about tomorrow, I'm not talking of 2 years, I'm not even talking of 7 years. In 7 years also you cannot calculate some of these products base rate, but over a long period you can calculate these base rates. So you can calculate, and you need to calculate this. We are coming up with a retirement planning calculator where we will put all of these variables. So you can put in the data, whatever your current expenditure is, and you can put the number of years, and you can get this is how it will grow, how the asset value will grow, how the expenses would grow, and then if you were to draw down from the assets post retirement, how long will it last? These are the 3-4 separate calculators. We not all in one calculator, then it will become very complex, but we are coming out with these for very shortly. And finally, post retirement income and support, possibly known, because you never know what's going to happen in 15 years, 20 years, but yeah, you possibly know where you stand on each of these. Once again, I must repeat that point number 6 can completely negate everything from 1 to 5. You may have nothing, you may have saved nothing, but you may still be taken care of perfectly well if you have post-retirement income and support. So my whole presentation is based on the fact that don't count on that. If you count on that, then that's fantastic. Then your condition is completely different. To repeat what I've already mentioned, what the various things that you need to do. Estimate these expenses that are current expenses. Estimate expenses after retirement. I would advise compound the expenditure figure at 10%. Okay. For instance, 10 years later, 30,000 per month will be around 78,000 per month. It's not difficult to calculate these figures. There are other websites also which give you these calculators. You need to put in how much I'm spending now. You need to put in an assumed rate. Press, give me the figure, it will give you the figure. So depending on how long you are away from retirement, make this calculation. Step 3, find out how are you going to fund that expenditure so many years later. For instance, in this case, a 9% FD with a corpus of 2.34 crore is going to fund your 78,000 rupees per month. Okay. Now, a lot of people may balk at that figure, but remember, this is a figure years from now. This is not today's figure, one. Number two, the way your expenses will go, the way your asset value also will grow. Second, and that's not the subject of this session, but people must keep their ears and eyes open about what to do with their main asset, which is a property, how to encash. India does have, on paper, we have something called a reverse mortgage. Doesn't work. In real life, it doesn't work. There's a central bank which offers it in conjunction with an insurance company, but it's too expensive, it's too little money, and they are themselves reluctant to sell. So you have to bang your head on central bank, say, hey, I want this product, why don't you come and show it to me? They'll probably come if they want to. So it's not a popular product, and all service providers work on a simple principle: how many people are buying. It's a chicken and egg situation, because they don't sell, many people don't buy. Because many people don't buy, they say that there's no interest. If there's no interest, they have that much less interest in selling it to you. So but their interest will come, I think, when there are a lot of people will be in the situation that I talked about. Step 4, how will you get there? Current investment plus planned investment. Please make realistic assumptions. The moment you do this step 4, you will probably realize that you will probably have to do your calculations of where you have currently invested. So if you are one of those 10 families that we saw successively, it should come as a shock to you that 27 lakh is the property value and 2 lakh in the bank. 10% is your actually realizable. So once you do those calculations, you will start realizing automatically that with that kind of income expenditure profile, the bulk of your money is going into EMI, you are unlikely to get to that 2.34 crore figure in this example. And then finally you need to do a calculation. What if there is a shortfall? Assume you're going to live for 20-25 years. The shortfall is a huge subject, completely different session, and I do have a second session. I don't know if some of you may have attended. We do this in 2 parts. This is the first part, and the second is retirement savings, how to get there. So where I actually discuss products. To repeat, this session is to make you aware of, please do the calculations. And these calculations are easy to do. Only 3 or 4 things you need to look at: how much am I saving, how much is the expenditure, compound it over 10 years, or sorry, at 10%. Number of years is, when you're going to retire. At that stage, how much money you need and how you're going to get there. So 2-3 separate streams of calculations. These are all fairly simple things to do, and calculators are available on the net also. Some of these things are available on the net.